Excellent. Looks like we have a great crowd here. I am going to turn things over to my friend Julius Damato in just a moment. Thank you for joining. Our question and answer panel is open. We love these webinars to be interactive, so please feel free to send in your questions. We are discussing securing ChatGPT Teams and Enterprise today. As many of you are aware, we launched a white paper and we have had such conversations and so many questions from both clients and non-clients alike that we felt having a live webinar and having our AI experts and our AI team on board would be a perfect time to do this. So with that said, I'm going to turn this over. Our friend Julius is usually speaking about Microsoft Copilot, but today he's going to tackle ChatGPT Teams along with Bryan Lyons. Julius?
Awesome. Thank you, Jen. Hello, everybody. For those familiar with me, Julius Damato, as Jen lovely introduced. I'm Director of Microsoft Modern Workplace and AI Solutions here at ECI. If you wish to connect, email address is there. QR code will take me to my LinkedIn profile. I'm also joined by my colleague, Bryan Lyons, who is Principal Consultant for Microsoft 365 and Azure Solutions. So today, as mentioned, we're going to talk quite a bit about ChatGPT Teams, ChatGPT Enterprise, securing it, and really what to really be looking for. This is a very slide-heavy presentation. I'm going to be very upfront because there's a lot of nuanced pieces with this, and really all the AI technologies that exist that aren't air quote Microsoft Copilot. So with that, you're going to hear us kind of talk quite a bit about Microsoft Purview. If you haven't seen our previous webinars on that, a link over to that so you can hear about how that can help and where it fits in. A lot of what we're talking about does require some specific Microsoft licensing if you want to leverage that from a tool perspective. And then kind of lastly, you're going to hear us talk about Copilot as well quite a bit. And largely it's to compare how that meets a lot of the regulatory and compliance needs without having to do as crazy of a stringent DDQ or due diligence questionnaire with OpenAI. That being said, Bryan and I have been on quite a few client conversations with the OpenAI team there, and they always go quite fun, and we'll highlight a couple of those as a part of we run through here on that. But today we're going to talk about adoption of the technology kind of overall within the financial services, talk about largely the key differences between ChatGPT Teams and Enterprise, and really why you need Enterprise. Then we'll talk about the risk landscape, a bit on mitigating controls, governance, operational controls, offboarding, onboarding, and really some best practices on data purging and offboarding. So that being said, let's talk about adoption, right? Really, from an AI tool perspective, every AI tool is reshaping how our clients as well as the industry is continuing kind of to lead in the sense there. So really every tool is useful and has a use case, fortunate or not. And when you do that, we do need to look at how adoption is being handled. From adopting a Gen AI and ChatGPT Enterprise in particular, though, it really is accelerating rapidly across financial services. Not just, again, Copilot, but more specifically ChatGPT. So whether you're a hedge fund, private equity, investment bank and firm, really everyone's eager to use it for research, use it for legal review, compliance, reporting analytics, and really it does have a tremendous amount of transformative potential, but it does have quite a unique and complex kind of risk landscape on what you really need to be on top of. Unfortunately, with AI is accelerating at a rate that we haven't seen as from a technology in really the last 3 years, and because of that, it evolves every week. Microsoft publishes the new stuff they do with Copilot on a weekly basis. I know ChatGPT has their blog posts and their subscription that you can sign into to get the changes they're making with their models and sign up for some of the beta programs there. But with that, it does introduce a tremendous amount of due diligence and risk that clients are not really looking at holistically. Some of these calls we've gone on, the client just asks 2, 3 questions about how ChatGPT is handling the data, and they were like, "Great, send me the quote, I'll sign it and send it over." And that's not due diligence. Please, with every AI tool, do proper due diligence. It is really hyper important with these tools, especially since a lot of the youngins coming into the workforce have friends that have AI startups or much more familiar with the tool set that they want to bring in, and it does create innovation and does move things quickly, but it really does create a lot of complexity. That being said, enterprise is being slapped around on a lot of AI tools, whether that's Claude, Perplexity, ChatGPT, etc. And the term enterprise can sometimes be misconstrued. And really, when you see it, a lot of people immediately assume it's secure, it's compliant, it comes with some default security, or doesn't have a lot of configuration. It's honestly the exact opposite. Enterprise ChatGPT specifically does enable you to do a tremendous amount. You can use compliance reporting, you can get information out of it from an admin perspective, but they literally just give you the API key. It's your responsibility to go in and actually configure it, actually turn on security, make sure that you're auditing, make sure you're doing what you need to do from a compliance perspective. It's not an out of the box experience, and you do need to look at how you do that specifically. So when we look at it from a risk and managed service approach, right, there are some key identifiers there that need to be looked at, whether it be security, compliance, and data governance. It's all kind of evolved exponentially from an AI adoption and SaaS platform perspective. So it is important you have information being logged into a SIM, logged to a risk mitigation system, being able to do review, and not to be Big Brother. A lot of clients I work with want to treat the ChatGPT and AI in general like Google searches. Unfortunately, that's not how it's being viewed by regulators, by litigation, by the SEC. They want to see you taking charge on it, being proactive about how data is being handled. And kind of the bottom line is you really do need to know your data and your AI estate to implement best practices. If you are letting people freely, no holds bar, go and add any AI tool that they want, it does create a level of kind of risk in that regard, where it's kind of every AI platform under the sun says they're secure, but again, did you do the due diligence? Have you certified it? Have you verified it? Is your compliance team okay with it? Have you checked it with legal? Is your board okay with using those tools? Number of clients interacted with, there's quite a lot of clients that don't want people to use Otter, or don't want people using Firefly, or the inverse, where they just don't particularly care what note-taking app they're using. That's not a good way to think about it. From that regard. And some of this we're going to cover is really going to be a highlight there. So let's talk about really the key differences between ChatGPT Teams and Enterprise, and kind of why the ECI recommendation is Enterprise. It largely has to come down to, again, to SSO, being able to do a provisioning of user accounts, the compliance APIs, again, to be able to either archive that with Global Relay, Marsh, or do it inside of Purview. From an admin perspective, you really just get some basic controls. You don't get much with Teams. It really is kind of just a quick stamp to say that ChatGPT is not doing anything with your models, but you're not then doing anything to protect your data. From a user capacity perspective, unfortunately, depending on what sales rep you get from OpenAI, because their sales people are much more aggressive than ours, if you can believe it, I've seen quotes signed for as little as 10 people. I've seen prices as crazy as $70 or $80 is down to 30 or 40. So it really just depends on who you kind of get on the phone. Unfortunately, we're working with ChatGPT to get a partnership so that we can kind of pseudo offer ChatGPT Enterprise at a set rate, at a set scaling piece there. If you don't have 150 users, that becomes kind of important. But again, unfortunately, if you get the right sales rep, they'll sell you whatever you would like. With Enterprise 2, you also get SLAs, you get their support. So if you're having issues, or if you think there's an incident, you can work with their support and our XDR team and SOC team to help review that. And then from a regulatory perspective, ChatGPT Enterprise is SOC 2. It does have DPA, and it does have e-discovery capabilities, provided you tie that into Microsoft Purview, at least. And just kind of to help highlight that a bit, right? So when we talk about the security and compliance gaps, ChatGPT Teams lacks the enterprise-grade security feature sets, as we've talked about. If you require immutable auditing or e-discovery, Teams does not have that. You need Enterprise, and you need to connect it both to advise that you connect it to Purview from an auditing perspective, as well as Smarsh and Global Relay. And then Teams allows users to just arbitrarily add licenses, invite people without real control. So a big thing that's happening from an attack surface perspective is end users are using either ChatGPT Teams or Enterprise without doing any real review or admin setup, and people are adding their personal ChatGPT accounts to these workspaces to work separately or work offline. And that does introduce a huge risk factor on the data that's now in that workspace is shareable with those people. There's also a toggle in ChatGPT that lets you use the advanced features, or basically share everything you have there, in order to be able to do that, and bring in people externally. So it does introduce a huge level of risk, in inviting external people. You should not have your workspaces open from that regard. From a regulatory perspective, it's kind of, again, immutable auditing. We talk about a lot of the SEC SIM. I think that slide is a copy paste of the same verbiage. So let me just quickly grab the actual bullet point from that, because that's what you get when you go quick. But as that's loading, your cost versus risk trade-off, right? So Teams does come out cheaper. It's typically, air quote, more affordable. It's anywhere between 25 and 30 dollars a user a month. So it's not really, air quote, cheaper than Copilot, which is a common comparison. But Enterprise, again, really wide scale on the cost implications there. But again, case protruded to have a minimum. It does have kind of some pieces there. But if you're interested in doing custom GPTs, you do get governance on that. We can lock that in DSPM for AI under Microsoft. So if you want to see how people are interacting with that, you do see a lot of the pieces there. For a regulatory perspective, right, the part that is missing is regulated firms need to ensure they're journaling and you have some form of retention. SEC and FIN rulings have made it clear that you do need to have some form of AI review. You need to do some form of review on how you're handling that, and do a regular review of it. It's not something that you should set and forget, especially since how quickly these tools are evolving. So I'll make sure that that section gets updated when the slide deck goes out to everyone else. So let's talk about comprehensive risk and kind of the landscape that's there. Thank you, Bryan, for answering some of the questions in the chat. So sensitivity data and regulatory obligations really need to be handled much more sensitive than they kind of are today, whether it be highly sensitive data, regulated data with trading positions, investor identities, memos, compensation records. They all carry regulatory, financial, and reputable risks. And the digitalization of workflows is now really, with Gen AI, really exposes the data to new attack sectors. So you do need to make sure that you have your data labeled. You do have data classified. There's been Forrester reports, Gartner reports that really highlight that by 2030, everybody should have some form of classification, some form of data labeling. If it's something as simple as to have everything classified and you have somebody who's doing regular review, that is a start. So it is important that we get there. And again, you can achieve that with Microsoft Purview, regardless of where your data lives. If you want to do it with stuff in SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, data that lives in a network share, we've connected Purview to SQL databases, managed instances. So if you want to classify data there, label it, secure it, do have that functionality there. But the regulatory frameworks such as the SEC, FINRA, GDPR, and CCPA are only really heightening the need for these type of tools in data resiliency as we kind of move forward with it as a technology space. Identity and access management, again, really, really important, really to ensure that you don't have unauthorized access, really doing a lot around what's referred to as insider user risk scoring, whether that be the user or the endpoints. You really want to make sure that you have SSO, MFA. You can lock down user accounts in the event that there is an incident. Again, first thing that hackers are doing when they get on an endpoint is they're looking for what AI tools you have, what AI tools the end user is using, and they're flooding it with prompts, trying to get out as much information as they can very quickly and then kind of run with it. I've seen a few instances where people have been, hackers have added themselves to ChatGPT workspaces or marked the admin center to allow for them to be public, and are just adding in accounts unbeknownst to end users, and just, again, looking at data that is being asked, being questioned, and building alongside unbeknownst to end users and to admins. So it's important to have auditing and review on that. The API integrations with ChatGPT are really endless and boundless. That comes with risk from what are people doing with an AI integration perspective, if you want people to be able to or don't know that that's a capability, do you want them using any API? Do you want them using APIs? Do you want people building custom GPTs with no guardrails? It really does present a huge risk, especially if those APIs allow for read write. They allow for data to go back and forth. So it does require real diligence on if you want to allow that or not. You don't get some of the core security feature sets that you get with Copilot, Copilot Studio, and Azure AI Foundry. So it is important, and credential leakage is a real thing, whether that be due to weak hygiene or creating APIs or OAuth authentication requests to sources of information that are over permissioned, overshared. It does present that risk if someone queries it and asks those questions. From a compliance perspective, right? Failing to archive or audit AI interactions can lead to violations. It's no surpriser to probably many of you. So you do need to do something about it. We had some fun conversations the last couple of days with clients that let people use free ChatGPT or use ChatGPT Pro, so the paid version, or just letting people use any tools that they want without any oversight, any review. It's important that you have an AI policy and then it is being honored. There needs to be real repercussions because your end user is not as much at risk as you are. You can fire an employee, you can sue an employee, but if you damage your reputation, anything that is proprietary leaks out, you do run that risk. It damages the business more than it does the end user. So you do need to be on top of that. You should be identifying any areas where you may have some incomplete logging. We can do that both with Purview. We can look at it from a perspective of using our SIM-SOC solutions if you're interested. I know that CyberArk and was it Arctic Wolf and those other platforms do have some form of AI integration as well, but you need to make sure that you have that actually on. You deploy the appropriate plugins. You make sure if you're in an area where you have to notify employees of monitoring that you're doing that as a part of your policy. So you do need to make sure that you're doing that to really bring it forward. And AI workflows are really moving data across at a pace that we haven't seen. I've seen clients that have users that have built custom GPTs to pass stuff off to AWS Bedrock, sent stuff across over Copilot Studio that maybe shouldn't have. And it does introduce risk. And then the Microsoft DSPM for AI tooling can see agent-agent interactions. They can label them. You can even data label some of those as well. So it is something important from that regard. To answer your question, Pravin, and the question is Copilot more compliant versus other AI with the respect to movement of data across jurisdictions? Yes. You can set up default ruling around what type of data can move. If you do have data residency requirements, Copilot can honor most of them. Just depends on the feature set, but it's a very quick. You turn on the toggle. If you need worm compliance or the SEC ruling for immutable data logging, that can be turned on as well with a simple email request. So it can meet all of those and very quickly and not as impactful. The agent interactions are all logged from a declarative or from an autonomous level as well. So if you're looking at agentic workflows going kind of 301, 401 from a agent and AI perspective, you can see all that. It can be tagged. And now with Purview, you can even put sensitivity labels on agents. So you can say an agent is highly confidential and then have DLP controls that target that agent and its interactions, not just the data. So it is really evolving from that perspective. So when we talk about data privacy risks, right? Sensitive data leakage. So employees can input confidential lists, compensation figures, strategic plans into ChatGPT and risk that exposure. ChatGPT says they don't train or coach the models, but wink, wink, air quotes, there again are toggles that basically turn off that protection in the admin center. So it's important that you don't have shared workspaces on. You're not sharing with the public anything you're doing in ChatGPT. There's a couple of sliders for that. So you do want to make sure you have that at least secured from that regard. You do get a bit of insider risk threats from that, right? There's malicious, careless people that are using ChatGPT. I had a fun conversation with someone who was just using ChatGPT Pro for research, and I started talking about with Copilot, you're able to do AI interactions. With Purview, we can pull in the ChatGPT Enterprise interactions, and there was sheer panic in the room about the organization being able to see the prompts. And is that sheer panic because the user's doing something they're not supposed to, or are they just don't want Big Brother? So it is a real concern whether the insider risk is malicious intent or not. It does exist. And then there is a constant management gap. Tools are constantly evolving. There isn't really, in most cases, a centralized way to do an oversight. The Microsoft Purview tool, to keep plugging it as a Microsoft shrill, it's there. We can turn it on. We can ingest that. It does have that capability. That has the ability to do other third-party tools. So if you want to use Perplexity, you want to use Claude, we can pull those in. Or if you want to offer those models to your end users, we can build agents with Copilot and extend them to AI Foundry, and then you can use any model you want. There's over 1,400 models that are available and selectable in Azure AI Foundry that we can spin up. Then it's your copy of the model. All of the logging that happens there gets stored in Purview. You can see what people do with it, and you can really give people those models and that tooling, and you're just paying for the tokens and the storage for the model. So that cost can be very little, but it gives you all of the compliance needs that we're kind of running through here today. So when we talk about data risks, right? Encryption key control. So OpenAI controls encryption keys without bringing your own key. So that can risk internal exposure or not. If you want that feature set, it's not there. You can bring your own key with Copilot if that's something that you are interested in doing. From data segregation perspective, there's no logical separation with ChatGPT. So if a user has data that's not there or not, it really doesn't give you that full capability to plug it or to know it. And then your third party add-ons, right? There's a lot of there that's unvetted. OpenAI's marketplace on there, or their connectors and their integrators do introduce risk with, again, Microsoft Copilot. If you want to use any of the connectors there, they're certified from Microsoft in most cases, and or certified from the vendor. So you can look for that Microsoft attestation or the vendor attestation to know that what they're doing with your data is secure. And they can meet your other needs, as well as it's a very simple ping on the Microsoft side to make sure that how they're treating your data is in line with what you expect and what you may need to meet. And then the last slide on this section is really around model learning and vendor access risks, right? So while OpenAI asserts that enterprise data is not being used, there's ambiguity in the policies, there's ambiguity in what they may do in the future. A number of clients we talk to are specifically fearful about OpenAI potentially being sold or acquired. What would that mean if Elon Musk decided to buy it and could do it and did it? So making sure that you're picking a tool that has small risk. All this is around risk. Holy smokes! Risk assessment, right? And where you want to put your risk in which bucket. So it is a real concern for a number of clients. And OpenAI retains admin access to your data. They don't offer, like with Microsoft Copilot, the ability to use customer lockbox. So OpenAI can, technically speaking, go in, review the logs, review information that's there, and that does have inherent risks because it does have human oversight. Whereas with Copilot, you have the option to say we don't want humans being able to have the ability to have any level of oversight. So that was quite a bit. So I'm going to pause for a second, one, to get a sip of water, and two, to see if there's any questions about some of the topics we've covered so far, because I know it is a lot, and we've only halfway there. Cool. So let's talk about mitigation strategies and some of those controls. So identity and access management, again, use SSO, set up MFA, do role-based access control so you can really secure and make sure that only at specific endpoints can access the feature set. Limit it only to corporate devices. Really reduce your attack surface from that perspective. You do want to make sure you're doing endpoint and API protection. So you want to use either SentinelOne, CrowdStrike, Microsoft Defender, ATP, and make sure that your API endpoints have some level of monitoring, whether that be rate limiting or alerting. We can pull that data into the SOC team if you have our SIM SOC solution. So it is something that we're able to bring in. And then from a credential hygiene perspective, you want to automate credential management. You really want to enforce either passwordless or strong authentication. And then you do want to have a continuous strategy on security awareness. So continuously educating your users, just like you do your annual HR compliant, your don't be the weakest link in the security training stuff. You should be doing the same thing with AI and really honing that in. A couple pieces as well that's not on this slide. So for those who are still here and paying attention, now's your time to shine. With ChatGPT Enterprise, there really isn't a way to force people to use ChatGPT Enterprise if you have the web page available from an access perspective. Your options are have ChatGPT so people can use their personal accounts and or their corporate account. That introduces risk. It's not like Copilot where we can force everyone to use the work version of Copilot. People can use their personal accounts, and sometimes it happens by mistake where someone doesn't realize they're not in their work account. They use their personal, they paste something in there that is highly sensitive, that introduces risk. So the recommendation is that you're using the ChatGPT Enterprise desktop app, because that only way you can use that app is if you're enterprise enabled. And the recommendation today is that you don't use the ChatGPT Outlook plugin or Word plugin for from a data perspective, unless you have Purview implemented and you're doing stuff with data labeling and classifications. Largely because those tools are a bit slow, because it has to look at the OST, it has to look at what's in that document. It's not as snappy air quote as Copilot. So it is something to keep in mind. I had one client tell me it took them 45 minutes to find an email that was only 3 days old, which hey, it's a real risk when you're using a different tool to scan, do a RAG, do ingestment, etc., on content that lives in a file on an endpoint. When we talk about compliance controls, retention and archiving, hyper important. Again, make sure you're doing with Smart Global Relay. You can do it with Microsoft Purview if you don't want to pay additional licensing fees from Smart Global Relay and you have Microsoft 365 E5. So that can have retention policies. You can match the SEC ruling, FINRA, for those pieces from that perspective. There is comprehensive audit logging, and we can do that with whether you want to use our SIM, Microsoft Purview, Azure Sentinel, Splunk. You can create immutable logging, and they do support e-discovery and regulatory response. I like the our tooling and Microsoft Purview specifically because if we can get Defender reporting, if we can get Cloud App Discovery feeding in data, we can build a comprehensive. Here's what happened on an endpoint. Here's how the tool was used. Here's what left. And we can really hone in on that versus having to go to 7 tools to do the same picture graphing, which happens and adds time to remediation. And then from a data residency perspective, use region-specific deployments. You can configure geofencing. We can do data residency controls on that. So importantly, again, if you want to use ChatGPT and you have data residency needs, let's have a conversation. We can extend those models via Azure with AI Foundry, and you can use those models with your data jurisdictions in mind. DLP, sharing, group segmentation, it's all stuff that's hyper important. So doing DLP, prompt filtering, we can do a bit of that with Microsoft Purview. There are other tools like Sierra that has that ability to do that as well. Author AI is another one that you could put in front of that. Do go in today. If anybody here is using ChatGPT Enterprise, disable sharing, turn on the features to make sure that you're not allowing for certain third-party add-ins. Make sure you have browser capabilities adjusted. It is high risk. You want to at least do it for high-risk users in high-risk areas to make sure they're not pumping in data they're not supposed to. And do group-based segmentation. You want to use RBAC. You want to make sure that sensitive data is being used by the appropriate people in the appropriate groups, and not just kind of willy-nilly with any data connector that's available. From an encryption perspective, if you need, bring your own key. Do it with another tool. ChatGPT Enterprise today doesn't support it. Consider leveraging, again, OpenAI via Azure with AI Foundry, or ECI's Ella platform can do that as well, with bringing your own key and agentic workflows. So we do have that capability in the tool set that we've built. You do want to have tenant isolation controls in place. So set up and deploy logical technical controls that guarantee that you have strict data segregation between departments and client entities. Last thing you want to do is invite a user to a workspace with data in it that they're not privy to. So again, important to have mitigating controls, whether it be with Purview, Sierra, some of the others I mentioned so far, and do regular security audits. It's hyper important. You're seeing what people have in there. You're doing some form of penetration testing, and then doing third-party evaluations on the AI environments and integrators. We have tooling here at ACI that we can do to help scan that. We have phishing and pen testing that we can offer as well, if you have any of those. And then we can leverage Microsoft Purview or other platforms really to forward audit reports to the compliance teams, make sure they're getting auditing, make sure they're doing something about the alerting. And that can be as robust or as little as you want. Importantly, making sure that data custodians and your compliance teams are aware of what they need in order to be able to review that. We have a program that we can run through here at ECI to help you with that if you need as well. And then from a model learning and vendor access perspective, right? You want to make sure you're matching your contractual agreements to ensure your enterprise agreements explicitly prohibit the use of firm data for training. You have a mandate on audit rights and clarify penalties for unauthorized access. Again, make sure your business policies are airtight, especially if you have one specifically separate for AI. I mean, your AI policy should be very clear about the repercussions, what type of data is usable, what type of classifiers are in place in order to do that. And you want to do continuous vendor monitoring. You want to do continuous review of the AI tools, not just ChatGPT, not just Perplexity, but any other AI tool you're looking to do. Do your regular due diligence. Do an annual vendor review. These tools are changing constantly. If you want to do it every 6 or every 3 months as features get added, I implore you to do it. It only helps strengthen your tool set and strengthen you from a compliance perspective. Been a few calls where we've had a few gotchas with some vendors from a tooling perspective, and some clients have opted to not use those tools because they can't answer specific questions. But there are more clients throwing caution to the wind than I would like to see, and I'm sure Bryan and everyone else here would agree from the ECI side, where there's these small AI startups that clients are being very nonchalant about data security controls and how they're handling data, and they're just relying on a piece of paper that say that employees aren't going to put sensitive data in there, but don't have any mitigating controls to confirm it's not happening, or auditing to confirm it's not happening, or when it does, have something to trigger to notify and have repercussions for it. So let's talk about governance, everyone's favorite topic. So there is centralized management in OpenAI's ChatGPT Enterprise with Teams. You can do some of it, but it's very limited. But with Microsoft Purview, we can bring a lot of that to the forefront, help with monitoring usage, respond to specific incidents, whether it be from our SIM or a SOC team, or you can trigger alerts and have someone on your admin team or your IT team take action on those as well. There is change control, continuous improvement. So you do want to maintain a risk register. You want to schedule regular reviews. You want to adopt controls as the threats kind of continue to evolve. Again, you can rely on us and our GRC team to help you with that as well. But importantly, what you're going to see and what Microsoft has done with the Purview platform and a lot of other vendors are starting to follow suit is configuring adaptive controls and adaptive protections so that the control can evolve, and it's not hard and rigid. A hard, rigid control, if it doesn't match the rule, it just will keep going. Whereas having an adaptive control allows you to have that kind of, this is kind of gray area. Let me flag an alert or put a block in place if there's gray area, because those are going to continue to happen more so now than they have in arguably the last 30 years. You want to do continual employee training, make sure the employees understand that they have a level of accountability. They shouldn't just take what is put into AI and spat back out at face value. They need to be cautious of the data. Importantly, with the new era of modern work, right? When we talk about data being in Box, SharePoint, Ignite, these other locations, IT has less stringent control over it. There's a lot more reliance on the user and the data owners to ensure that they're handling their data appropriately. That applies to AI as well. If an end user has data that they don't want to be used by AI or it should not be used by AI, enabling that ability is important, and making sure that you have regular touch bases with the users to ensure that they're doing what they're supposed to is important. So regularly meeting with the users, regularly updating your AI policy, regularly reinforcing it is hyper important. It seems like it'll be really buggy. Seems like you're going to be a negative Nancy. It's going to seem like you're being a nuance, but it's important. Your reputation is on the line. Our air quote ours is on the line if we're your technology provider, because we need to be able to remediate and react just as quickly to these threats. So it's important that we're all in this together from a data handling perspective. And when we talk about that, leads really great into incident response in the reporting protocols. So you want to establish those peer protocols, have your call trees, make sure that you have a set. Here's what should happen in these incidents, and you have you're leveraging integrated logging with those forensic tools. And then you do want to do regular reporting. Don't just say you're doing it, turn on the tool to get a report, and then only look at it when there's a problem. That's the opposite of use of reporting should be. So do at least quarterly reviews. Ideally, you should be just doing something monthly as a touch base. The more you do it, the shorter those meetings have to be. You don't need to do a once a quarter, 6 hour full day. Let's talk about all these things when you can just hash that out on a monthly cadence. And importantly, If you do it in Teams with Copilot, you can have a facilitator take the notes. You can have it track your agenda and make sure that you're keeping on the ball with what you should be doing. Next section is about offboarding risks and data exposure because that is really prevalent with these tools, especially as it pertains to doing stuff from a residual data exposure perspective. So you want to look at chat histories. You want to make sure that if you have there's shared content there or sensitive attachments, that that's being reviewed. When a user leaves, you want to check what they were doing in the tools. You want to make sure that you have some way to audit what happened and do kind of a regular review on that cadence. So whether users share chats or outputs with other users, if they uploaded sensitive data or code snippets or something that is potentially damning to the business if it went out elsewhere with insufficient or sufficient permissions, that you have some form of control on that. And again, review, review. Incomplete account deactivation, you're going to have delayed offboarding. So when a user is terminated, you do want to make sure that you're checking the account. There's a lack of automated purge on the ChatGPT Enterprise side. So by default, deleting the user doesn't always guarantee all the data is removed immediately. So you do want to go in and check. It applies to stuff that's shared. It applies, importantly, if they built custom GPTs, if they have API connections set up with their accounts. The account is terminated. You want to know what they had set up, because if what they set up was critical to the business from a workflow perspective, you're going to lose it when the account goes away. So doing regular audits on that. If you are looking to set up an enterprise or an organization-wide AI solution, reach out to us. We can help you set that up in a way that isn't reliant on a specific user, because that's really where there's business loss, because there's no recovery, there's no go back with the enterprise or with ChatGPT. So regularly checking that and auditing that is important. From a regulatory and legal perspective, you want to make sure you have data retention. You want to make sure you're doing e-discovery and audit checking. It's hyper important that you're regularly auditing this, whether it be from unmanaged data from departed users, surface and audits, or if you want to, from a regulatory requirement perspective, mandate you have retention. You do want to match your books and records. It can't hurt to do it now. It didn't hurt to do it before, but with the gray area in the rulings, there's kind of a blind eye to some of it. But at this point in time, with the technology and how quickly everyone is gravitating to deploy it, it is important that you have some form of retention in place or have it on your map to get it done by the end of the year. And then from a user persistence and admin control perspective, user deactivation, you want to disable or delete the account via SSO. SSO is hyper important. Again, you can control login location, where they can access, data they can pass through with that. From a data persistence perspective, chat histories, shared GPTs, and uploaded content can remain there indefinitely. So you want to make sure that if it's sensitive, it gets removed. And then from an admin control perspective, some of the platforms allow you to reassign, archive, or purge the content, but it may require you to do that via API as well, depending on where the content is. So you got to make sure that if you're doing that, you have the capability to do that as well. And then how OpenAI handles the documentation on retention. Their own documentation indicates that user data is not automatically purged upon account deletion, just to call it outright. So chat content can be retained according to what they have there or whatever you want to have set up from an organization or regulatory perspective. So making sure that what you do with ChatGPT Enterprise, importantly, it matches. So if you still think that Teams is a good idea, let me know. But from a organization perspective, you should be keeping that in mind. So we're on the last setup of slides here, right? So let's talk about some best practices for data purging and offboarding. So you need to have a strong process. So immediate deactivation, you want to automate the deactivation of the account via SSO or using an SCIM product as a part of an HR exit checklist. With Microsoft Purview, we can tie in your HR platform as well into it. So we can say that if a user has an end date, if a user is terminated, we can have the HR system talk to Entra ID, disable the account, take action, so we can set up some of those workflows for those who may be interested in that. And then you do want to do an audit log search of what was the last stuff the person accessed, where were they actively logged in. There's a number of clients that I talk to that allow people to use their work account for non-work things as it pertains to the ChatGPT. That's fine and all, but do understand employees should be aware that whatever they're pumping into there is something that your business has the right to review in the event of litigation. So do be mindful of that. You want to have some form of manual automated data purge. So you want to purge the histories. You don't want it lingering in there, especially if you have it being pulled in from a journaling or an archiving or retention perspective. So you do want to use the APIs, delete, export, purge the data. Don't let it linger there because it gets stale. We all know the biggest enemy of AI is old, stale data. And then you do want to reassign or archive the content that's needed. So make sure that any content that is marked as a regulatorily required to be retained. Whew, make sure that you have that in place there, and you have some type of mitigating control and list of actions to take place on that. From a shared content review, again, it's everything I've already mentioned. So shared links and GPTs, you want to identify and review those. You want to manage your shared items. You want to make sure that you disable, delete, archive, or transfer ownership. If there are GPTs that are business critical, transfer them to your user. Let's have a conversation about getting that into a real enterprise workflow so it's not tied to a user account, because we see it with the Power Platform, we see it with Snowflake, we see it with Jira, where people set up workflows tied to an account, not thinking big picture. They leave unbeknownst, everything comes to a crawl, everything stops, because as soon as the account gets disabled, so do those workflows. And then you do want to integrate with DLP and archiving. Purview, I'm going to keep plugging it. So use Purview, use Smarsh, use Global Relay. Make sure that you have something there. Make sure your compliance team is doing regular review of your AI interactions. You can do that with DSPM for AI under Microsoft Purview. And then you do want to have an archival policy that does retain only what is required for as long as you need it. So only take what you need, only keep it for as long as you need it. Don't keep all the extra junk. We've all been at most of our companies for 10, 15 years. I've been here 14 years, fortunately enough. I have junk from when I started on the help desk, and none of that's relevant. So data disposition is important. Data lifecycle management is important. So do keep that in mind when you are working with these tools as well. And then make sure you have clear policy, make sure you're doing regular review, and make sure you're doing end user training. Hyper important, not only from a enabling them from a enablement perspective, but from a policy review perspective, making sure that they're up to date. If you're changing your handbooks, you're changing your policy, communicate it. Knowledge is power, and you don't want someone to be in inadvertent risk. Last slide here. So when we talk about risk mitigations and some of the tooling, a lot of what you're going to see there is stuff we've already talked about. Pulling stuff from the compliance APIs with Microsoft Purview, using tools like Sierra, making sure you have SSO done with either Entra ID, Okta, Dump Cloud, whatever you're using, archive what's required, purge any other data from production, and then make sure you document and log the offboardings. Make sure you have purge actions. It's tied in the Purview. You can see user account enable, disable. You can see on e-discovery searching and audit searching what they touched, what they didn't touch. Importantly, that's where Defender for Cloud and Defender for Endpoint come into play, because we can see websites the person went to, if they were trying to obfuscate data, if they were pumping data into their Gmail account, if you don't have controls over personal email accounts or access to personal storage accounts. We can see that with the tooling and apply risk actions or adaptive controls on that. So really, in conclusion, right, from risk to readiness, adoption demands clarity, right? You need to make sure that you're being clear, concise, you have control, and you have continuous governance on what it is that you're implementing. Again, a lot of what I've talked about is geared towards ChatGPT Enterprise, but please take it as apply to any AI tool. The lack of due diligence is quite frightening from my perspective, and I'm not a compliance officer, to just willy-nilly add tools without checking how they're handling your data, checking if they're using your data for training or coaching, how the human oversight is, because that is becoming really important. And you want to understand the risks when you implement these tools. Don't just let Jimmy sign up with his credit card to do whatever he wants. You do want to make sure that you have controls over shadow IT. We can do all that with Microsoft licensing. Most clients today, believe it or not, already have a lot of the mitigating controls licensed. We just got to turn them on. We just got to sit down and have a couple of conversations around those configurations. It's not difficult. Doesn't need to be a long drawn out process. Bryan and I do Purview implementations as little as 3 weeks and as much as 12 months or more. Just really depends on your data escape, depends on your data hygiene. And these things are becoming significantly more important over the years. So thank everybody for their time. If there's any questions, I'll hang out. Feel free to throw it in the chat. Feel free to throw it in the Q&A. If you have any other questions, comments, concerns, do feel free to reach out to your account team. You can feel free to reach out to me. Just to throw that slide up real quick for those who want it or need it or came late. Shoot me an email, ping me on LinkedIn. Happy to have a conversation and talk through some of this. Jen, floor is back to you.
Absolutely. I was just going to throw it out there, Julius, as you did, to see if anyone had any questions. We could take a minute or two. And then remind everyone that the slide deck for all of this, as well as the recording, will be in your email box, probably by early next week. So you will have all of this info available to you. Bryan, anything to add? Do we see any conversation in the chat that you may want to highlight?
No, I think we got all the answers from the chat initially, and Julius grabbed one there during the presentation. So yeah, I think Julius covered pretty much everything pretty well there.
Excellent.
Yep, and I'm just updating that slide now that had that error, so that will be in this deck that everybody gets. Do
There's a question in the chat. Do you recommend SASE products such as Netscope, Zscaler, Cato Networks for AI monitoring and governance?
100%. I constantly mention Microsoft Purview. There are other tools that can do it. We talk about Purview because a lot of clients don't realize they're licensed for that feature set. Believe it or not, with Microsoft Intune and some of the other browser controls that we can put in place, you can see other AI interactions without having to go that deep. But you can use products like those. You can look at leveraging iBoss, Sierra. There's a number of tools that do it, but we do recommend that you have some form of monitoring and governance over it. It shouldn't be no holds bar. If you already have any of those solutions, you can add most of those as an add-on. Some of them have caveats. So most clients are already licensed for the Microsoft tool. So let's look to make sure that that meets what your business needs. And let's turn that on because, again, no additional cost there. But I know like the Zscaler one is quite pricey and has a limited tool set on what it can see. So it really just depends on when you want to do monitoring, is it more for tools you approve or tools you don't approve? With again Microsoft Purview and Defender for Cloud App, we can also set up sanctioned and unsanctioned apps. So we can say that there are AI tools that are just by default not sanctioned, so they're not usable. So that'll block not only the app but the website, the URL, etc. So it'll touch multiple bases. And then we can set up some alerting on people trying to access those platforms. So Bryan and I normally recommend using the Microsoft tooling, see what it can, make sure it achieves what you're looking for, and then if not, then add on with other tools. It's a way to kind of not have to do that big sprawl of 15 tools to do the same thing.
Yeah, there's also a part of a tool that you didn't mention from Microsoft that's part of E5 licensing, which most people have. They're doing Purview and Copilot, called Global Secure Access. And it does the kind of the SASE features as well as can replace VPN from a connectivity standpoint as well if you're connecting to specific office sites using a VPN for that. So, and it's already included in E5 licensing.
So just to clarify on that, it's not entirely included. Certain parts of it are included. If you want it for private access or internet access, it is an additional cost. If you have Microsoft 365 E5 licensing, I believe it's an additional $6 a user a month. Don't quote me. So it is actually a pretty cost efficient from there. If you don't have it, you can add it on for 12 for both, or maybe it's 12 for each. Sorry, I'm dumb. Don't quote me on the pricing. But it's $850. Just pulling up my notes real quick. It's $850 for GSA if you already have E5, and then it is $24 if you don't. So, but happy to talk about that. Pricing changes all the time, and Microsoft runs a tremendous amount of a tremendous amount of
Promotions.
promotions. Thank you, Jen. I appreciate you.
Always.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I don't see any more questions. Julius, I know you and Bryan are always available to jump on a call, have conversations. People, our existing clients can reach out to their CRMs. Otherwise, you can reach out directly to Julius or Bryan or through sales@eci.com if you have any questions. And with that, we will bid adieu and make sure this gets in your hands by early next week.
Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you so much, Julius and Bryan. Appreciate the help.